So I was saying that we are here today with partners from NGI Explorers, namely EY and Sarah, as well as partners from NGI Tetra, namely Inga and Justina, as well as myself, Adele from the European Startup Network. First of all, I would like to shortly share about what the Next Generation Initiative is, because we have external attendees here and who might not be aware of what NGI actually means. So very shortly, the Next Generation Initiative is an initiative that has been launched by the European Commission in the autumn of 2016. And the aim is to shape the future internet as a collaborative and interoperable platform ecosystem that respects and embodies the values that are very important for Europe, which are openness, inclusivity, privacy, transparency, cooperation, and protection of data. Now, a few words about what is actually NGI Tetra and who are NGI Explorers. So we at NGI Tetra, we are a business accelerator, and we help projects that have received funding through NGI to enter the market through the access to training, mentoring, coaching, matchmaking, and networking. And NGI Explorers, it's a program that sponsors immersive missions to the United States for European internet researchers and innovators, providing them with the skills, the network, and the right resources to be able to accelerate their ideas. And now it's time to introduce you to our amazing speakers. We have with us Henrik Ibsen, who is the CEO at Open Telehealth. He went from a developer background to entrepreneur, and he's been an open source pioneer for years now. We have Roger Esso with us as well, who is the CEO and founder at Sakai. He's an entrepreneur, tech and business advisor, and definitely an open source veteran. They will be able to introduce themselves in more details, of course. Very shortly, what are the main topics that we will cover in the webinar today? So on the menu today, we will learn about what are the characteristics of open source projects, how to choose open source license and tools, what is the open source impact on the following components. We will learn about the process and quality management with open source, how to commercialize an open source product. So what are the possible revenue streams? How to define a go-to-market strategy. We'll also dive into the funding. We'll have a look at the open source business models, how to build an engaged community. And finally, we will have our speakers sharing their precious experiences, the do's and don'ts, tips and tricks from their experience. Let's wait no more. I would like to give the floor first to Henrik, who will be followed by Roger, and then we will get back to myself, and we can start then the questions and answers session in the end. So Henrik, the floor is yours. I stopped sharing my screen, so you can start sharing yours, please.
Thank you. There we go. And I hope you see my open slide.
Yep.
Excellent. So welcome. My agenda today, I've got 40 minutes and I have too many slides and too little time. So I will be speaking fast. Please collect any questions you have in the chat and we'll follow up later on or revisit the recording to hear it again. So yeah, I'm going to go through an agenda. You can see it in front of you. It doesn't really, I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. But what I want to spend a little bit of time on is presenting myself, because I've been to numerous conferences and shows and award shows and all kinds of stuff. And I always wonder about the guy on the chair speaking, if he actually knows what the hell he's talking about or not. So I just want to make sure that you understand that I have been through a lot of stuff and I know quite a lot about healthcare IT and IT in general, and also open source. So my start in this was back in healthcare IT in '97, where we had the first big projects. And I had the opportunity to make a bid for the National Health Portal that was launched in 2003. And I did that before, of course, and won because I had a strategic vision about being open source and owning their own source and in general becoming a development platform as well as a production platform. I won that project, went on to be probably the most advanced virtual care platform in the world, with more than 160 systems integrated, and 6.9 unique users every month. And considering Denmark is a 5.5 million citizen country, that's quite well. So I proceeded to do a lot of consulting on the medical records and national government and infrastructure, and built actually a standardization platform for the government in 2011, standardizing communication across the healthcare IT setup between GPs, between municipal installations, between the regional hospitals and their IT system, and the government national registers and databases. So that's has driven a digitalization of the Danish environment and society. So we are now 100% digitized and can see our online prescriptions anywhere we get. So we come into the hospital on conscience, we can see that as well. So it's quite significant. After that, I went on to be a high-level consultant for the governments in the region and the national environment in Denmark. Spent a lot of time in that. Eventually got satisfied or tired of solving other people's problems and wanted to solve my own. So I had the opportunity to get a grant from the government to develop the first ever open source telehealth remote patient monitoring system. Got that in 2010. Did the proof of concept in the year after, and went live with a scale-up system in 2013. I will spend some time on that particular project later on because it's significant. And we have been running with large-scale production of remote patient monitoring since then. So that's me. And I wanted to just very briefly touch upon the different source types, because we are talking about open source, but there are so many different constellations of that. So I'm just going to go through that very briefly and say, well, as I perceive this, open source is not completely a freebie for everybody. It is actually a controlled access to source code, because there are rules. The rules may be few and far between, but they may be very comprehensive and detail very, very precise instructions about how you as a developer are allowed to use this open source. And because there are more than 200 of these, you need to step very careful when you pull in an open source component. Free source on the other hand is something that is totally Klondike, totally Wild West. There's no rules, you can do whatever you want and nobody will come after you after that. Also probably not the best place to get something you want to maintain, but anyway. Open source is when you want to do open source, but you're afraid that you can't reach your business goals because you haven't got the necessary control of the development and the system. So you decide to pretend to be open source, but develop your own code and then have it to yourself. You may publish it or not, but it's something you have by yourself. So you have the control of development. Share source, as I see it, is someone decide to share IP with other parties, maybe allowing you to join your resources and still going each other way with your IP, and one party can open source it, one cannot, so you can do whatever you want with it. And then there's a closed source with the traditional, I have my IP and you're never going to share it kind of guy. And this is often used to build solutions where you need control, but also commercial control, because you want to have funded financing, VCs and nothing, and they're always about IP and patent stuff. So that's, well, you know that probably. There's a lot of stuff on this on the internet. I have a link in bottom of the slide that gives a lot of details about these two various types of what they do. So please click the link and go study, and you can dive into it a lot. So in my platform, the Open Telehealth platform, which is a remote patient monitoring platform, this is a list of the open source licenses that we use in our platform. And our platform isn't even entirely open sourced itself, but we are entirely based on open source tools. So the question to you guys would be, do you, in the project that you operate, do you actually know what licenses you're using and what kind of restrictions are applied to those licenses? Because, well, when you do, you'll find out that this is really, really annoying, and you kind of scrunch up your face and say, oh my God, do I really need to know? But the number of licenses you're using is probably less than the number of potential breaches you now have in your system, because each one of these constitute a potential security risk, a potential security risk that you need to address in some manner or not. So that's a lot to take in, but I think it's important to realize that open source isn't just fantastic; it's also something you need to take into account in terms of security and business continuity, and especially business continuity is something I will come back to a lot. So The open telehealth platform should have been tendered in 2012. It wasn't, because I was the only guy in Denmark that was actually willing to go out and develop an open source platform that could be implemented. And I did that because I was really angry that the commercial parts offering such systems were so greedy. They were exceptionally greedy. So my reaction was to do the opposite and say, no, it's not. It's supposed to be very, very affordable. Otherwise, how would it deploy in large numbers and help people if it's so expensive? That doesn't make sense to me. So I wanted to do open source, and I eventually got $1 million and did the open source implementation, and we proved that it could scale, and there was a positive return on investment. We demonstrated that we could save the government 35% of the patient costs using open source remote patient monitoring. That's like $20 a day. So that was fantastic. So we went live in 2013 and demonstrated return on investment, and then we posted it to GitHub with a bow tie on it, March 2015, and then here it is. Voila, government, guys, please take over, do your stuff. And then I was kind of scratching my head and say, okay, then what am I going to do? Because well, the project had kind of been done, and the IP was given to the government, so I was just waiting for them to pick up the governance and organize the open source community and make it live and vibrant and use some government resources, something that was extremely meaningful. But they didn't. Typically, governments, they went to committees and they were scratching their buttocks and doing nothing. And eventually I was so frustrated because we had done a really, really great project. So I decided to look into things. So I took the IP in and I looked at it and said, okay, what can I do? I found out that in the medical device space, there is actually no such thing allowed as open source, because you have to be able to trace any event. Any adverse event has to be traced back to a legal entity that takes full responsibility for the IP. So you're actually not allowed to do open source. You can add open source onto it, but the core project needs to be owned IP, closed IP for legal reasons. So I said, okay, so this is not going to go anywhere anyway, because it can't. It's not allowed. But it gave me the opportunity to say, okay, in order for this to live on, I will take the IP in, I will find investors to put money into this project, and then move on from there. And I actually managed, because I set it up as a closed IP for the core, and then open source for the add-ons, I managed to find investors interested in pursuing this, because they actually felt that there was a sustainable business. So this was the key to getting the funding on board. So we funded the Open Telehealth company and formed it in September 2015, and took the OS in and forked it into an open telehealth version. And then we invested in developing and expanding it based on a closed IP's core and an open source attitude towards the rest of the market. So the open core architecture is something we term the Linux of telehealth. So we try to build an operating system to help others get into the telehealth without having to invent the wheel every time. And this is continue to be our message and our business model and our mission. So we did it in a way we said, okay, we can afford to invest in everything ourselves. So every time some of the clients that were fortunately part of the project as well, the first clients, we told them, if you want this feature, you have to pay for it. But if you pay for it, you have to be aware that it will be made available to everybody. So it's kind of like an open source development model, but it's a closed IP system. So we managed to convince all the participants in the project that they would pay, and then the community would benefit. And we would use that payment to finance the development, but everybody would benefit, like as if it was an open source in function, although not in IP. So we did the SaaS hosting fee as well. We do a patient subscription fee, and we have a mandatory support fee. So when we onboard clients, we get payment for our time used on that. So we had a number of different revenue streams trying to get money together to keep funding it and developing. So then we had Open API, and of course we made sure that all the data was owned by the client, and then we gave away source code to the app so everybody could have a free source entry and easy start. And today, we have a virtual healthcare OS which put together by a number of professional services that are needed to get people started. A lot of documentation that is high-level professional SDK. We give away source code to the app and to the portals and to integrations to make it easy to get started. And we have a lot of tools that we apply as well, like automated deployment tools for easy deployment in any cloud anywhere in the world. Monitoring, reporting, and AI integration to external AI engines to make them available through the platform. So it's kind of like an OS set up. And of course, the binaries can be available as Kubernetes operators for autonomous deployment, or we can host it in the cloud. So this is pretty much it. It's GDPR compliant, of course, HIPAA compliant, ISO certified, and military grade encryption. So we've reached a lot by applying these kind of revenue streams onto an open source, originally open source, but not so anymore, business model. So the money makers in this system is those components here, the quality management system, the reporting, the monitoring, the AI integration. A lot of stuff can be invoiced because it's a value-added service that people will understand that they can't have for free because it is resource intensive. And also the binaries can be monetized. That is not open source, I know, but if I can't do open source, I can do the next best. And if my survival of my company is depending on me close IPing some of it and retaining the open source business model and attitude, then so be it, because I'm a survivor and not an idealist. So, but that's me. So choosing the OS tools when you build a project is always about business continuity. And this is really something I was bulking at this in the beginning, but after 8 years of doing this, I have found out that there's only one thing really that matters in the world, and that's business continuity. Everything you do has to be about making sure that your stuff keeps running and that the development cost does not kill you. So when you choose you have to consider the development speed. Have you chosen tools that allow you to move fast? Is it efficient? Is it maintainable? Have you chosen something that is easy maintainable and not really complex? And it's not about the programming language, Java. It's about what is easy to maintain, what works well, and what is resilient. Then you need to worry about transition plans. How do you move from one phase to the next in a way that you don't kill yourself? You need to do package deals in order to sort of like target certain solution types to clients in order to get their attention. You need to concern yourself about availability of the system. You need to find out, how do I guarantee a 99.985 availability of my platform every day, every year, every week, every month, all the time, and document it, because people will be asking for it and expecting it. And if you are not very stringent and disciplined in the way you develop, deploy, quality control, and so on and so forth, you can't have high availability. So there's some things you need to do, and I'll come back to that. Vulnerabilities is always an issue. I don't know if you remember the last period of time here, we have had massive breaches coming from inside Docker and SaltStack, which are components that we use. And these totally compromised our system. They like root access like that. And we couldn't do anything about it. They published the vulnerability on the Friday. We saw it Saturday, we fixed it. But before we fixed it, we were compromised. And some crypto miners barged into our root access and started mining with our CPU. And this is the crux of the matter when you depend on components from outside. There are vulnerabilities you simply can't control, but you need to be able to handle it and be aware of it and check for it continuously and have an emergency plan for what you do when it happens. Deployment automation is extremely important. I have 300 servers online running. If I had any kind of manual procedure on that, it would screw up immediately. Security is important. You need to take extreme care to design your security architecture, starting with the load balancer, who gets access, how does it do, and there's a lot of stuff like that. I'll come back to that. Encryption is important, of course. Logging audits need to be there and be reportable because people want to know, and monitoring as well. You need to keep track of the stuff running, because if it doesn't run, then you're in big problem. And then keep the number of components down. I didn't succeed in that, but if you can, especially the core components, you get less problems that you otherwise will. So when you choose how to do this, don't be a fanatic. Be a pragmatic developer. Keep focus on business goals and business continuity, because this will govern the way you should pick and choose whatever you do. And in development, what we did, we focused on Ubuntu Linux, because it has a very nice update package. It is patched every night with all the parts in this open source package are patched there, so you don't have to worry about that, and that's great. We focused on microservices because they are independent, stateless components that does not eat up resources. And since it's microservice, they can live and die by themselves and scale horizontally, which is good. The virtual machine footprint is important as well, because you don't want to spend a lot of memory on a virtual machine in servers that runs in virtual space. You want to have something very small. So we opted for something called Elixir and Erlang, which is a very, very compact, very intense, compressed virtual engine. Stability is important. And how do you get that? Well, in the old times, the Java VM spent a lot of time doing garbage collections instead of just shutting down restarting. And that was a bad stability thing. So think about what you choose and how it works in practice. Do the best of breed and not the best breeders. So it may not be the popular ones that are the best. And consider that when you choose the stuff. Make sure you got online repository because people will be working from home and from different places. Make sure you have shared documentation. Every single piece of stuff you do, you have to document it because it's going to bite you in the butt if you don't. Make sure you got automated build, tests, feature tests, and dependency mapped out so you don't get any surprises. Surprises is the worst crap you can have in a project, and diligence in setting things up is the way to avoid it. Automated deployment is extremely important because, as you know, everything that needs a manual touch is a screw up waiting to happen. That's a fact. And you will find out yourself if you don't, but focus and invest in deployment, automated scripting for the use, like things like Docker and SourceStack or Kubernetes or whatever. Make sure you don't have any manual procedures in the deployment so you know it works every time. Otherwise, you will be screwed. Security is more than important. It's extremely important, and people don't give it enough attention. But when you're finished with it, you need to be able to say, yeah, it's TLS 1.2. So we access the service by secure socket shells. We have military-grade encryption. We have a load balancer that's shut down everything and their family. We have cores. We have whitelisting. We do pen tests from external parties, and we even have maybe we have a database encryption. Well, but that's difficult. Beware of that because people will ask you to do database encryption, and then you ask them, okay, I'll do database encryption. But what nobody knows is that it's a big sham, because having an encrypted database, that means that the key for decrypting the database needs to reside on the server, right? So it's in the root. So if someone get access to the root, they get access to the encryption, and then they get access to the database as well. So why encrypt it if the key is anyway in the root access? So if you have root access, you have access to everything. And then encrypting the database doesn't help you. And then Accenture security, red team consultants, experts, circles will tell you, oh, but then you just implement an external encryption server. So you go outside to get your token before you decrypt the access to the database. And then I think, okay, from a performance point of view, that's not going to fly. And even if it did, fact of the matter is, how do you authenticate yourself towards the encryption server? Yeah, you need to have a validation and an authentication to get to the encryption server. And that authentication is also in the root. So you can anyway get authentication and then get the external key and then decrypt database if you have root access. So do not spend too much energy designing your security around what to do when people have root access. You can make it harder for them, but if they have root access, you are basically screwed, and then plan on how to recuperate from that if you want to do anything. But anyway, security is important, and ISO 27001 is about server access to virtual servers, which you need to be able to argue that you can do as well. Fortunately, most cloud providers have it, and you don't have to spend that much time on it unless you want to do your private hosting. Support maintenance, we don't do much open source in that, but I have good results with Zendesk and Splunk, and this is again about doing stuff that works in a production setting. So try not to be fanatic and single-minded about using OS in anywhere. Try to use the tools, if you can, that makes your project fly and gives it commercial viability. I think that's a more important point. So strategy choice, automation or brute force, because automation requires a lot of investment, and people tend to say, we don't need that. We'll just hire some Indian guys and they'll do the work for us. So that's the brute force approach. I see that a lot. So I would not do that. I would say automation, because you will never regret the fact that your system is completely stable, and you can argue that you don't have any errors, because what's going to happen is your clients are going to come to say, there is an error in your server software. Your server software is screwed up and you have the problem. You have to fix it. If you know for a fact that you don't have errors in your system, you can go back and say, no, shut up. you go to your Indian developer DevOps and tell him he screwed up the mapping, the DNS mapping table again, because we don't have errors, you have. And this is so powerful that you can shut people up like that. And you don't spend time on fixing other problems, other people's screw ups, because you know for a fact that you have not made a mistake. That's very, very powerful, and also save you a lot of time. So anything that needs manual intervention will fail. There is no doubt about it, and it will give you problems and will take away your availability. But most importantly, having automation will save you a ton of time, because you know where the error is, and you can tell your clients exactly that, and speed up the recovery process and avoid using resources on fixing other people's problems. So in the quality management space, I'm a medical device, so I am tasked by being ISO 13485 compliant. And this is the Rolls-Royce, the uber powerful Rolls-Royce race car tuned to incredible speed kind of quality management system, because it covers so much stuff you don't want to know. But the fact of the matter is that we have had tremendous success in our business by having a quality management system that makes us very, very, very secure and very what do you call it, confident in our ability to not make mistakes and do stuff that actually works, that has been tested from A to Z. So it has an extremely high impact on the quality of what we deliver to our clients, and take away a lot of the errors and stuff that would otherwise give us a bad reputation and make frustrated clients. So there is something to be said about quality management system. And I know that most of the people doing OS is kind of like, yeah, this is Klondike, I don't have to do this stuff. But if you really want to do a project and you want to take it into a commercial setting, and you want to have it become viable and go somewhere, you need to consider quality management system. Maybe not to the level of what we have here, but you need to do it in order to make sure that that you share information about how things are done, and that you can lift your joint knowledge about how things should be done, and make sure that you avoid a lot of the stupid mistakes that quality management will catch. So just to illustrate what happens in this case, the ISO 13485 certificate is something you need to be audited to get. So it's not an easy win. And when I first found this out, I was looking into it, and I said, okay, so let's see, what is this really about? Let me see, okay, there's an audit checklist. Let me download that. And I downloaded, and I had like 38 pages of stuff that needs to be in order before I could pass a certification. And then I said, yeah, what the fork? This is so much work. So, but there was no doubt about it. It was mandatory in my business, so we had to do it. And it really has been an enormous asset for us to have this stuff. So I can recommend doing quality management. Maybe not to the extent that we have, but I'm just going to give you a few pointers to stuff you need to consider at least. So every time you identify repetitive action, any repetitive action, have your developer describing it, putting it in as a procedure, putting it on your SharePoint or your wiki or your Confluence site or whatever you have. Make sure it is documented and published so everybody knows it's there, and this is what you do when you do that. That gives you the opportunity to keep track of the procedure, because then you have a place to update it. But also everybody else in the project, when it grows, will know how to do stuff and don't have to find things out themselves. And this increases knowledge and integration of the team, because everybody knows what other people are doing. And it gives you, as a startup, gives you the ability to have an overview of what the hell's going on in your project. So that's important. Everything you start with, like I showed you the list of all our OS licenses, everything you assume, every technology you apply and integrate, and every tool you use must be listed somewhere and revised when you change it. So you keep track on what comes into the project. But if you don't, and if there's no awareness that this is an issue, people will just drag in open source and components left and right as they see fit, and you end up by having a freak show of stuff and technology that goes in 10 different directions, and it's very, very difficult to harmonize and get this rolling in an effective way. So get that under control, and do not ever deviate from the procedure, because this is going to be lifeblood. This is where your quality comes from, is by doing what you say you do. So decide what you want to do, describe it, make sure that all developers are on board with this way of doing it, and make sure that you don't deviate. And if your boss tells you to do it, fire the guy because he always doesn't know what's up and down. You definitely need to be very strict about this because this is going to make and break your project moving forward, especially when the pressure starts building. So if you develop, document it. I would recommend that you set up a JIRA, most people do, but set up the JIRA in a way that everything that is ever done by anyone technical in the company, bar none, has to be in a JIRA ticket that has to be described, reviewed by someone who is responsible and put into motion and then tracked until it is deployed. This will give you an extremely powerful tool to keep track of what you've done, where you've done it and how you've done it. And it can help you project exactly when you're going to finish because your sprints will be more visible and the progress will be more visible. So this is an amazing tool. If you want to go into heavy quality management, JIRA is also a very important tool and can be coupled with Confluence to do just that. Allocate dedicated resource to quality management. I know this stinks because I didn't like it either, but it's the payback once the project has a certain size is immense because this makes sure that someone has quality as a responsible area and make sure that people work in it. So you have to live your quality management. If you put it on the outside just to document what guys are doing, then it doesn't work. The developers has to be a part of it too. They need to want to make good quality and behave professionally in the environment that you create. So that's kind of an attitude you need to cultivate. So basically, when you want to move into a production from a startup, you need efficiency and predictability, and that comes from having your ducks in a row and fixing stuff in a predictable way. So becoming effective and becoming predictable is the road to success. And this also has a huge lean into the quality management side and the automation and taking away risk factors that can screw your project up out of the blue. So preventive care into the setup and the environment and how you form your production in your companies is important, and quality management is an important part of it. I cannot stress enough that this is extremely valuable for any kind of project that wants to go forward. And if you go into the really big open source project and look what they do, they have extreme diligence in the quality management, and getting something published and getting something contributed to these open source systems is difficult because you have to go through a lot of hoops to get to the point where you can actually submit code to the project. So they understand that a rotten apple that is let through the door can screw everybody else's work. And that's why you have quality management to make sure that you filter that out. Okay, so looking at open source projects and hybrid projects, because that's the world I'm in. I'm in the hybrid world. I was not able to do a complete open source project. I think bar the commercial side, one of the few observations I've done is that in the pure OS world, you need community, you need someone to give you the resources for the development, which means that you either pay for them themselves, or your company does, or your business angel does, or whoever, or you need to find community support, you need to do crowdsourcing or have direct funding, or pay for them themselves or whatever. But the money needs to come from somewhere. Whereas if in the hybrid world, you can get funding and resources from another place. But it's difficult to control development in an open source world because, well, there's so many independent actors and vectors in that project that wants to do different stuff and has different focuses, that it can be difficult to take charge and control the development of an open source project if you have external resources that are paying for their own time. So there are some complexities that will give you some management headaches. It's doable, but it's a different setup than a normal project is. And one of the big issues for me is that you can't pick the responsibility and integrity and security on anyone, because anyone you have allowed into the project can add to the system, and they will not take responsibility for the whole system. They will only take responsibility for what they did, and that means that you are left holding the bag in terms of integrity and responsibility. So if you have any adverse events, then you are holding the bag, and then that's your problem, and you can't point to where things went wrong. So this is why you have the closed IP or closed core that I'm using, so I can claim this is my responsibility, and that's an important point. in the hybrid worlds, you have the advantages of having some at least some closed IP because you have the accountability. You can have more creative business models if you have control of the IP. I think that's at least my conclusion. But I'll come back to that a little bit. You can work with open access instead of open source, and my conclusion is that I am actually able to replicate all the advantages of open source by using the same characteristics of open source, but still having a closed source core. So using it on the software as a service model, the source code becomes less significant, and the experience features and the experience possibilities from outside actors are actually not depending on the source code being open, but that the availability of the services and the openness of the ecosystem can easily be implemented with a semi-closed IP as well as with open source. So there is a lot of different commercial opportunities, but the basic ones that I have identified is recurrent revenue that comes from licensing and from application that give access to the service and kind of subscription level. That's an obvious one, and that's a viable business model in open source as well. Then there's operation, hosting, and software as a service model, which also can give you a revenue stream. There is the professional services, which is something we've seen in the open source world for a lot as well. That's also very viable. Being experts in something, it will give you in a good position. And then there is support. If your project has a specific purpose, then people using it will be able and willing to pay for support while doing stuff. They will want your help, your expert help to fix things and maybe build bespoke solutions or bespoke reports or whatever. And then if you have some products that is open source, then you can always say, okay, value-added services is an opportunity because I can add to this platform and I can charge that to someone who wants to have it added. Other revenue streams you can have, if you have an app, you can ask for money upfront in a direct download. You can do like I did and say, okay, feature development is going to cost you, but it will be made available for the entire ecosystem. So there's no owning the IP for you guys, even though you pay. You just pay for priority in the development team, but the ownership will be communal. So stop bitching. Basically, I put it nicely, but it's pretty much the way we do. And we have no problems doing that. People are willing to pay for priority development of features because they need it in their business. And product expansion, well, that's the other side of the feature development. If you think smartly about this, then you can drive your product development by having bespoke development financed by external parties who benefit from it. But avoid exclusivity. If someone say, I want to pay a lot of money for this functionality and this module or component, but I want to own it, then just walk away because it's not worth it. It's a lot of hassle. So in the business model, I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through the business model, but there's a link from underneath that outlines in excruciatingly detail the different business models for open source software. Read it, do your homework, and get that basic knowledge in there. But what I want to tell to you guys is that a business model is a plan, and yeah, you should have a plan because that's what business is about. And also realize that any plan you have it won't survive. It won't survive contact with the real world because any plan that meets the reality breaks apart, and you have to recalibrate it. So be aware that plans are good, but you need also to be flexible and realize that when it doesn't work, you have to go through an iteration and find a new way of doing your business model before you kind of find out where the money and the revenue and the setup should come from. So give yourself some time to work that out, a couple of iterations before you announce this is my business model, and try it out with one client at first and see how it works, and use the quality serial to review, learn, change, implement, and so on. So really think about how to innovate the business model, because innovation in business models is something that has driven huge successes over time, and will do it again and again and again. So if you're creative, can come with something that is creative and innovative, this will probably give you a lot of attraction. So I would recommend that. In my device world, when people want to buy medical devices, it's very expensive. So what to do? People can afford it. So instead of having them to buy it, I arrange for it to be leased, so they can pay a small monthly fee to get access to the device without having to shell out money to pay for it. That's innovation, and it opens market. So be creative and think out of the box. So going commercial, going to market strategy, from my point of view, is something I have a very bad relationship to, because I spent 1 month building a go-to-market strategy for an investor that wanted to have it. And basically what I found out is that I'd been wasting 1 month to try to explain stuff to a guy that didn't understand it and wouldn't understand it, because he just asked for the go-to-market strategy because it was in their checklist. With the companies they invest in, they need to have a go-to-market strategy. So that was a waste of time. So basically, strategy work, you have to be careful that it's not just a waste of time that doesn't bring you anything. But in the go-to-market strategy, well, if you just look at the definition, it's the plan of an organization utilizing their outside resources, e.g. sales force and distribution, to deliver their unique value proposition to customers and achieve competitive advantage. Yeah, right. That's, yeah, I could imagine that. I could probably work that out. So it's very dry size. So those who need it are the one that doesn't understand your business. If that is you, then you need it. And if anyone else asks for it, then consider carefully, do you want to spend the energy doing this? Do you need it? So you may probably not need it because you know your business, because it's your idea, right? But your employees may not exactly know, or your partners in crime may not exactly know what it's all about. So it may be needed to communicate stuff, and they can use it for that. And if you have it, use it to stake out goals and milestones, because if you want to spend energy doing it, you might as well get something out of it and use it for navigation. So in progress monitoring. Implementing a strategy is obvious. Well, from my point of view, if it's a good GTM strategy, you're going to do it anyway. So I wouldn't worry a lot about that. And you need it if you're new to this and need to map stuff out, and or if you need to explain it to an external boss investor that also doesn't get it. So, but be careful not to waste time doing one unless there's a really good reason for it. So funding, yeah, in open source, you either have to do it like self-financing staff, and people won't pay for their own time for long. It's possible, of course, but you can also do self-financing project with bespoke features. You can do the grants, you can do self-funding, you can have someone paying for it because it's a great idea, like a farmer who needs it, or you can do crowdsourcing, cribbleware, consulting service support. There's a number of different ways of doing that. Getting external funding is difficult. But if you take some of it out and does it as like the open core thing, where you have a closed IP and a lot of other open source stuff, you can actually attract investors, because I did that, and then you can get a completely different setup for your stuff. And VCs, they need to have some protected IP, or at least believe that it's there, before the money can get committed. So that's a viable strategy as well. So coming to the end here, do's and don'ts. If you can't do open source, try to retain as many traits from open source as possible, like free access to API, free examples of code for apps and portals, free access to the data in the database, or the data should go to the clients. You can get a lot done with that, because it is the functionality and the result of open source that is interesting for external parties, not the fact that it's open source or not. And the business community and business continuity above all else, when you choose anything, you should go for business continuity. And if that brings you to a place where you can't do complete open source, that's it. Decide on the business model and revenue streams, and then choose a model that supports sustainable business, because that's where you want to go. If you can't grow a project, if you want to grow a project, invest in quality management. You need it, lots of automation, and be aware that my time is up. So my finishing point is this: successful conversation of any project is not a question about OS or not. It's about how you do it. And the attention to stuff like automation and quality management is part of doing it the right way. So don't put too much focus on the OS, but if you do it, choose an open license that doesn't put too many restraints on your source code, and put some attention to that. All right. So coming back here, and questions, not now, later, and now I'll give the floor to Roger. Thanks.
Thanks, Enrique. Very nice presentation. Let me share my screen. Let me know if everyone see my screen.
Not yet.
Everyone see my screen?
No.
Not yet. We see that you have started screen sharing, but we can't see your screen.
Okay, let me fix it. And now?
Perfect. Now we can see your screen, Roger.
Okay. Okay, thank you, sorry for that. So my name is Roger. So Roger Isso. I'm a French citizen, so you can hear from my accent. But I'm based in Australia. That is a bit tricky. So I'm French, but based in Australia. So I'm going to more focus on open source and not really onto a specific product. So let's first introduce myself. So I have more than 10 years working for a company called Atos. So I left Atos in 2012. And I don't know if you guys know Atos. Atos is one of the biggest European system integrator. So I was the CTO of Atos public sector in France, and I have various positions. So as a CTO, as a build manager, as a head of open source, head of innovation and R&D. So I've done several R&D projects with European Union and also in France. And I also finished by working for Atos in global level. So as a global business development director for Atos International. So I was in charge of developing Atos digital monetization worldwide. So it was quite exciting. That was my last position with Atos. And then I moved to work for other company. So quickly, I want to share a bit my core skills and my experience. So I'm a CEO. I created 4 companies and I still have 2 running, one in Singapore, one in Australia. I've been a CEO for Atos public sector and for some other company. I'm definitely a CTO. I'm a tech guy and an open source advocate and we can say fanatic since a long time ago. And I have more than 7 years in innovation and R&D, as I discussed before, and in business development. And I also have a very strong expertise and background on startup advisory and venture capital. Okay, so if we focus on the CTO open source, I started working on open source in 1995, studying to do the first PHP Apache code. I joined OW2, formerly Object Web, in 2004, and I'm still a member, not active like I used to. I'm a former member of OpenStack Foundation, and I represent Atos on many open source events. And in terms of advising, I advise a few open source startups. VLC, Video Labs, the company behind VLC. I don't know if you guys know about VLC, but VLC Player is one of the most huge open source solution today in the world. And it's French, so that is great. I advise another startup, Wakanda, for JavaScript, full stack, and then another one, FangOffice, who's based in Latin America. So this is for a quick introduction. Of course, you can see you can access my profile on LinkedIn. So my agenda, I have 3 main topics. The first one is how to turn an open source code into a product. Second one, I will give you some successful example of open source business model, and I will share my tips and my experience on some open source project I have a chance to help, to scale, and to execute. So how to turn an open source code into a product? Because I guess most of you participants here have an open source project and they want to monetize or to launch a successful community and eventually make the code become a product. So we have 3 steps. Your code, okay, is mainly focused on developer. When today you're starting to put your code on GitHub or on GitLab or Bitbucket or whatever, your code have no feature as a step. It's only a code, and you focus and you're targeting developer. And then after that, you want to make your code become a product, so you need to think about market positioning. Like Eric said, you need to think about what is your market, what you want to achieve in terms of a product. And then the last one, you want to launch a startup using your product, so you need to find and identify your business model. It's not an easy thing to do because you need to try many business models before you find it. But that is important. The license you're going to select from the beginning will define your business model as well. And also we define the way your open source code will be moved into product. So you have some challenge. At this stage, your main challenge is community. How you make as an open source community adopt your code. When you move to a product, your main challenge is market penetration. How are you going to make your product successful, reach your target customer? And the last one, as a startup, is how to monetize and make revenue with your product. So talk about revenue model. But the underline of this is the open source license model. This is the big challenge from the beginning. You need to decide which license model you're going to use. So how to select the right license for your open source project. I highlight this part because it's quite important to know that the OS license, open source license you will select will impact your entire project, product, and business model. Okay, we will discuss this a bit during the QA, question answer, but you can also decide to have a dual license, basically an open source plus a commercial. But you need to select wisely because it can impact your business and your startup later. So I try to create 3 scenarios. So let's start with the first one. My code is 100%. I own the 100% of the code. Okay, this is my code. I coded it. I own 100%. I didn't integrate any external library or third-party solution. Okay, and I don't plan to integrate any third-party OS code later. Okay, that is important. I don't want to add any third-party. It's my code, and I don't want to add anything. But I allow my code to be integrated to any third-party solution. Basically, I'm okay that my code be integrated somewhere else. And that is important. I want any modification, including derivative or additional work or modification of my code, to be reversed to my project. Okay. Then, based on this, you decide. So you have very specific license to select. So this is what we call a strong copyleft. Okay, it means that you force any third party to reverse the contribution to your project. So you have the choice between the GPL, V2 and V3. Okay, the AGPL and the SSPL. But SSPL is not recognized today by OSI because it's Mongo is server-side public license, and it's MongoDB is mainly used for hosting. If you decide to go for a hosting business model, this eventually can be applied, but it's not recognized today as an open source license. Okay. So this is a strong copyleft. I'm sure you guys already know this, but it's important to know the 3 scenarios. Now, the second scenario is 100 or no 100% of my code. So basically, I have in my code, I have some additional code was not done by me. So library or integrating additional solution in my code. So, but the entire project is my project, okay? This means that I want to allow my code to be integrated to third party, and I want any, and that is important, and I want any modification, including derivative work, to be included and reversed back to my project. So it's a bit tricky because it's not fully your code. So basically, you already integrate additional library, maybe with different license, but you want that any change done on your code, your own code, I'm not talking about the third-party library, but on your own code, any modification done on this code to be reversed to your project. Then you can use the LGPL or the Mozilla public license for that, okay? So this is what we call a weak copyleft, where basically you give more room to third-party partner to use your project and complying with the third-party license already in your project, but you force them to have a strong copyleft on your own code, okay? Because it happens a lot. Most of projects don't come with 100% on code. They always integrate additional code, additional library from third-party project. So you need to, most of the time, use a weak copyleft license if you want to keep control of your code. Now, the permissive license, as you guys know, is that I'm okay that my code to be reused by third party, and without the need to reverse the change to my project. So this one is well known, MIT, Apache, and BSD clause 3. The difference between the clause 3 and clause 2 is that the clause 3 requires that the user or the developer who integrate your code in their code need to not use your name or identify your name in the code. They need to show your name in the code. So okay. So that is 3 scenarios. We can discuss this a bit later. You can access more information about the license here, because you can go on OZ and you have many different licenses. But basically, this is the main license we are using today, okay, on open source. Now, how to build an open source community, because that is a challenge. So I keep having my laptop running. The first thing to understand is that at this stage, where you are on open source code level, your open source code is your product. You really need to think about it like your product, okay? As a product, what is the value proposition of my code, okay? And we discussed this a bit later. And you need to understand that your target customer are the developer. I don't say your developer, the developer you need to convince to join your community. So when you think about this, the way you communicate with and the engagement you will have with the community will be very specific. And we have 3 key value action you need to have here. The first one is that developer must see and understand the value of your project. Okay, don't forget it's a product. As a product, you need to have a clear target niche. Okay, so you need to focus on developer who sees the value of your project. So it means that you need to clearly identify the value of your project. The second topic is developer will engage also based on your license model. Okay, so if you have a strong copyleft license, and then for me, from my experience, it will limit the number of, you will limit definitely your community engagement. Okay, because it means that developer will be forced to reverse any change back to your community, which can be good if the value of your project is well defined and makes sense. Okay, as a developer, I don't have any issue to reverse back to the community if the value of the project is clearly defined and makes sense for me. Okay. The third point of attention you need is that you need to make sure a developer see a clear roadmap, a good documentation. That is very important. Then, as a developer, we need to see the clear roadmap, and we need to see a good documentation on your project, on your community. Okay, so that is 3 action point of attention you need to have to make sure that you can engage with the community. Now, in terms of engagement, it's important to engage and listen to your community. Okay, in the beginning, you will have maybe few fork or few follow, but slowly, because open source community is a community of interest, and people refer to your project if they think that it makes sense for them to share with their friends. So listen to your community, engage with them, meet them physically, ideally, if you can, or online. So basically, you need to join some online event where you can meet your developer, your target developer, okay? And the last one is that it's important to invite key contributors or to your project to join your core team, okay? And especially when you need help, don't hesitate to ask this key contributor to join and to help, typically in the pull request or issue tracking or any other aspect of your project. Okay, so again, create a community is a long road. Okay, it takes time. It's not a big bang solution. It's going to take between 1 or 3, 4 years. From experience, I saw community. If again the value of your project is clear and it's very interesting, you can quickly move to on GitHub, for example, to have 1,000 or 5,000 stars quickly, because developer understand the value of the project and understand that they can be part of this. And because again, everyone, don't forget, internet is full of individuality and selfishness. Okay, I only go back to your project if I see any personal interest on your project. Okay, that is clear. So you need to make sure that the value of the project is clear and clearly defined. That is the main point here. Make sure that what you are promoting on GitHub or GitLab is clear and is something we can identify. So it's something as a developer I can identify myself to. Okay. Now, move to product. How to define and package an OS product. I used to say, no, open source is just another product, okay? Like say, Enric, okay, open source code don't make sense. It's just because we protect the code with a license. But it's, at the end of the day, it's just another product. And as another product, and I say, Enric, don't forget the QA. It's very important. Your product needs to be a good quality. But in terms of creating your product, don't forget to do the control integration, continuous integration, continuous deployment. And QA, of course, you need to have a clean shipping process, and now is no more, and that is important. When you are on the product side, you're no more in the community side. You move to internal process. So basically, only your core team can be part of this process. Okay, and even your lead developer can be part of this project, because the packaging is not involving community. It's pure internal. Okay, so when you decide to package your product, you need to ask yourself, what is the core purpose of my product? I'm not talking about open source code anymore. I'm talking about product. So what is the main purpose? What is the core purpose of my product? Who are my tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 user? Okay, okay. I'm sure you guys know the concept of tier 1, tier 2 users. So who are those users? Okay, you need to clearly identify them. Then what are your key user need and challenge? Okay, you need to also go through this and answer this question. What are my key user need and challenge? As soon as you get it, then you can ask yourself a question. What are your product key features? Okay, don't define the feature before you define the user. Okay, as we need basically the pen. What is the market pen I want to and challenge I want to address? And then what is the product, the feature I want to provide to address this market pain and challenge? The next one is, what is your product key success indicator? Basically, are you going to measure the success of your product? Okay, that is important. And at the end, what are your product foundation? And that is very important. The foundation of your product is what? Is open source, is addressing a specific value, okay, I define the level of security. My product is highly secure. My product don't share the data, user data, and so on and so on. So you need to define the product, the foundation of your product, because it needs to be aligned with the value of your code. Okay, so we discussed before, the value of your project need to be aligned with your product foundation. Okay, because that is where you will engage with customer. Customer will engage with you based on this product foundation. Okay, So after you define this flow and then you package your product, of course, you need to define and execute an online and field marketing. You need to combine both, okay? You cannot just do online marketing nowadays, especially on open source. You need to attend events like FOSDEM, Paris Open Source Summit, and so on and so on. And this will help you to study to plan a first market penetration. So normally at this stage, you study to see some customer coming to your because this is the product. Sorry for this. Now, you trade your community, you enable your community, you package your product with a clear foundation. And now, what is my business model? Okay. I said previously is that the license you will select will define your business model. And that is very important. Okay. It will also define the way you will execute your project. So your business model, I didn't put the last one is the marketing, marketing marketplace. We can discuss this if you need, but this is the three main open source business model we have today in the market. We have the open core, everybody know it, I will discuss a bit. We have the open source professional services, and we have the open source software hosting, okay? So the open core, well known, it means that you offer the open core, the core of your product to the community for free, okay? And then you have add-on or premium features who are commercial, okay? The tricky here is to find the balance between the core features and what you offer for free and what you make commercial, okay? And but the main point is that having an open core is that it keeps your community active and engaged. Personally, when I use an open source, I'm sometimes frustrated because the feature I really need are not public, are not open source. So basically, I say, they try to force me to go to purchase the premium and the commercial product. And this stopped me. And then sometimes I try to find an open source solution who cover the feature missing in this previous solution. So it's a tricky. You need to really balance it because you can increase your community, you can keep your community, or you can also decrease the community and create a lot of frustration. So the open core is one of the biggest business model today on open source market, where you're combining the open core with the premium add-on, and then you add on top of this consulting, support, and maintenance for the premium. Then you have the professional service one. We will discuss some example of a successful business model on professional service. Basically, what you do is that you don't code anything, you're just providing consulting and support on top of existing open source software. So what you do is that you select a list of open source software you're ready and you have the skill to provide consulting and support on top of them, okay? And you offer this as a service to private company, okay? We will see some example in the next slide. And the last one, who's starting to be very popular, is hosting. So basically, you deploy a PaaS, or can be also IaaS, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service. So you deploy this platform with open source code. You don't own the code. Of course, you need to respect the license you're embedding in your platform, and you package it as a service, and you sell a service to the end user. So we will also see some example we have today. Now, we see more and more business model combining the open core and hosting, for example. We even see some business model combining the three of them, so open core, professional service, and hosting. So we will see some example in the next slide. Okay, so we will discuss this and are happy to answer any question about this slide during our Q&A session. Now, I found this slide quite example from Blossom Capital because it gives you a very clear overview of a benchmark between business model, open source business model, okay? And especially the margin, the defensibility, the scalability. As I say, open core, the defensibility is high because you can say, okay, I'm applying a strong copyleft license. So can be AGPL or GPL or for the hosting SSLPL. So this gives you defensibility, because basically you say, okay, I give you my core for free, but if you, for some reason, you change something on my code, you need to reverse back to my community, to my project. And where the margin is high, because basically the selling and the selling point is very clear, okay, and especially when you're selling the premium feature on top of your core, you're making a high margin than if you do a professional services who require a lot of headcount to deliver the service, okay? And we will discuss an example. The defensibility is low because you don't own anything, right? So you don't, it's not your code, you don't own anything. So when we talk about defensibility, it's also about what we call IP protection, okay? Because defensibility means also IP protection. So this is higher, this is low, of course, this is low. The hosting is also low because it's not your code, your integrate open source code, you respect the license, and in terms of IP, it's very low. But the margin is quite interesting because it's like say, Henrik is a recurrent revenue model, okay? The marketplace is more, I'll give you an example here. For example, Android is a marketplace. Basically, you offer your product, and your product is widely integrated in different devices and OEM and so on. And you own the code, of course. So you own the code, and you give the code to be integrated, especially when you guys talk about hardware. I saw some question about hardware and how to select the right license for hardware and software. So we will discuss this. So, but you have you have a very limited use case about this. So you have Android who do that, who are very successful. You have Linux, so we can talk about Red Hat Linux, who also we're doing that. We have Canonical, who have some specific strategy with Ubuntu, and so on. Okay, so this is very interesting because they give you an idea of what is the potential of revenue of margin I can have based on the type of business model I'm selecting. Now, example of successful open source business model. Following the three model I discussed previously. Open core. Everyone know about Elasticsearch, but you will also discover that Elasticsearch is also doing Elastic Cloud. So they're also providing also a hosting model. Talend, and I will have a specific focus on Talend in the next slide. Talend start with an open core. Now Talend might move to also adding a hosting business model. Bonita, I select those startups because they're European, and I know them because when I started my work with Object Web, Talend and Bonita was just in the code and even code and product level. There was not even what we can say startup, okay, or there was early startup. So many of you can maybe find a good reference on looking about Talend and Bonita life cycle. Rocket Chat, because I know the founder and also been part of saying how they start. They also have an open core. So basically you have an open source version and you have a head-on. You need to pay to add additional feature. Knowledge, but it was formerly Spargo BI, also a product I know when they start, the way they change. Nuxeo is a French CMS content management system. I also follow from the beginning when they started, and they try also, from my understanding, to move to the hosting. We have Alfresco or something, so I know because when they're starting in 2000, 2003, something like that. And there was also in OpenCore, now Alfresco also providing a platform on cloud. In terms of professional services, everybody knows Red Hat. Even is today, Red Hat is packaging product and offering professional services on top of the products they own. But in the beginning, Red Hat was offering professional services on top of Red Hat OS, and it was purely support and maintenance. And I know because I signed a partnership with Red Hat when I was the head of Atos public sector, where Red Hat offers this service to us. Atos, because Atos is recently, a few years ago, created a partnership with Red Hat to offer support on the OpenShift. And typically is, again, I don't own the code, but I can provide consulting and support on top of the code. And Hortonworks, before joining Cloudora, was doing exactly similar to Red Hat, or doing the same thing. We have a long list, but I prefer to put some big name, you know, but I'm sure most of you don't plan to do this, okay? From our understanding, you already have your own code, so you will be mainly on OpenCore or OS hosting. So in terms of hosting, MongoDB, who moved its strategy to cloud, to hosting, was very successful. Okay, so MongoDB, they create a specific license for them, server-side public license. We have Redis, everybody know, in the DevOps and the infrastructure business. Okay, Redis has a dual license. You have open source BSD3 and Redis license, commercial. Everybody know NGIS. NGIS similar have a dual license, BSD2 and NGIS Plus, who is not really a license, but it's hard for me. I didn't find it's not really a license. It's a commercial version of NGIS. And of course, we already discussed Elastic, Tenant, and Alfresco. So this is kind of a good example of a successful open source business model, okay, well known, and who are generating a good margin, and with a high, and you need to align with investor expectation. So let's take a look of one success story, Talent, because I really like Talent success story. When they start, I was using Talent when I was working for Atos in 2003-4, and we use Talent Open Studio, that is a core, okay? Very good product, and it attract a lot of community because the value of the project was very clear. And that is how Talent start. They move to Talent Enterprise, so they offer a commercial version of the open source, and then they create different bundle of platform. Okay, so something you need to take in mind is that you have your open core, then you offer commercial version, and then you trade vertical. Okay, you trade vertical, can be a vertical market or vertical solution. So again, this is a slide from OW in 2013 from Talent. So you will see the different approach. So the Talent use a GPL, so strong copy left, with the Open Studio. So basically means that any change you create on the Open Studio need to be reversed to Talent. Then you have the Enterprise, the subscription version, okay, on the Enterprise from data integration, and then you have the same thing for the platform level, okay. So it's interesting to see the trade-off of the speaker of this event from Talent, community versus subscription edition, okay? You need to find a way to manage this, to balance it, okay? As they say, careful arbitrage, okay? You need to really think about, in terms of timing and time frame, when I make a proprietary feature available on open source, on open core, okay? Most of the time is 3 to 6 months gap, okay? So they release the proprietary features on the commercial edition, and 6 months to sometimes 12 months, they reverse this new feature in the open core. So you need to find the balance. Okay, because one of the risks is to be forked about the community, because this happened too. Huh? That is something we are not discussing a lot, but the community, if they found that you are moving too fast to commercial version, they can fork your solution if the license gives this possibility. Of course, GPL is quite complicated, but if you are on Apache or BSD or MIT, they can fork your product, your code, and try to create something more open source. So we have many examples like OnCloud with Nextcloud, who OnCloud, the OnCloud founder decided to fork to become Nextcloud. Now Nextcloud is more successful than OnCloud today. Okay, we have many examples. I can give you many examples of this. So be careful on the way you balance between open core and commercial. So to summarize this, how too much to community edition and too little to enterprise will impact your adoption. Okay, conversion down definitely because you are less customer, but you will increase your community. It will boost your community. Now, how too much to enterprise and less to community, it will decrease your community adoption and will, of course, increase your conversion. Okay, so keep the balance. That is basically what Trend shared in 2013 with ObjectWeb OW2 consortium. Now, let's quickly share my tips from my open source experience. I have a chance to I didn't put FangoFist here, but let's focus on Wakanda and Video Labs VLC. Wakanda, when I joined Wakanda, my mission was to help them to scale, to generate a strong partner network and community adoption. But the main challenge we face is that Wakanda, was actually, you can access the code on GitHub, doesn't have a clear open source license. Okay, and if we talk about the value of the project was clear, but the product foundation was not really well defined enough, and the community really didn't understand the project or the product foundation, and we didn't have the traction, and the community didn't scale. Okay, because the lack of transparency of the open source license. Of course, they have an enterprise license. This was clear. But my tips here is that when you define an open source license, or if you launch an open source project, be very clear about the license and the foundation of your product. Okay, make this very clear. That is the key point to attract developers. Okay. The second one is Video Labs. Video Labs is a company beyond the VLC. Basically, the founder of VLC have created a company called Video Labs. So Jean-Baptiste Kempis launched this company, Video Labs, to support VLC. So Jean-Baptiste is a lead committer, lead developer of VLC, and one of the founder of VLC. So I joined to help Jean-Baptiste and the team to generate revenue and to increase and develop the business development. And I face a different challenge here, okay? So Video Labs' business model basically is to do professional services. So Video Labs are providing a lot of consulting and custom development on top of VLC for big companies like Google, Facebook, and so on. But in terms of code and products, the open source is a GPL v2, code and product. In terms of monetizing the traction beyond this community, because we talk about so far more than 1 billion downloads of VLC across the world, and how to monetize such a huge community. And we face a challenge is that the community was very strong and was not ready to accept any monetization of VLC. And the risk, as you say, is that if we started to put to increase the proprietary the premium features on VLC, many developers will not be happy, and we will face the risk of a fork. So Jean-Baptiste don't want to take this risk, and that's why today VLC, even if it's one of the largest open source community today in the world, we cannot change the business model of VLC to add advertising, because we have been contacted by many companies who want to put ad on VLC player, and Jean-Baptiste always say, no, we cannot do that. If we do that, we take a risk to upset our community and to face a fork, and we don't want to do that. That's why this is an example of a huge open source community, a successful open source community, where we cannot monetize against the community wills and direction. Okay, so that is all for me, and I'm happy to answer any question.
Thank you so much, Roger, and thank you so much, Henrik, as well, for sharing your time and experiences with us. And now, as agreed, before moving to the questions and answers, I suggest that we stop the recording